Welcome back to Pia Talks, and today is actually Father's Day. So happy Father's Day for all the fathers that are watching. Today we're back with more true crime. Today I'm covering an episode of Betrayed, which is a show on Discovery ID, Season 4, Episode 3. And if you want to watch this episode, you could catch it on demand, or you could catch it on the Investigates Discovery app. I noticed after I watched this particular episode that this same story was covered on Swamp Murders, Season 3, Episode 10, also on Discovery ID. And I also noticed that some of the facts were switched around or changed a little. I also noticed that one of the shows gave a few more facts than the other. I think it has to do with Swamp Murders episode actually featured the victim's mother. And I think a few points may have been removed just to be respectful, which I totally understand. So before we get into it, if you have not subscribed, please do. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you can always be notified when I post new content. All right, so let's get into it. So this episode is about a beautiful, smart, amazing, creative young girl named Claudette Physic. This story takes place in Marietta, Georgia in the 1990s. In 1992, Claudette moves away for college and she goes to Southern Tech to study architecture. She is absolutely crazy about architecture, and this is the perfect school for her. While in school, she decides to take a job at a pet store. And I looked everywhere I could look online to try to find out which pet store it was that she worked for, but it was not included in any of the articles. It always just stated that she worked at a local pet shop. Once she went off to college, her parents moved to South Carolina, which is a 2-hour drive from Southern Tech. So they were still close enough to get to their daughter, and she was close enough to get to them. You know, when your kids go off to college, you just want to be able to get to them as soon as you can, as fast as you can. When kids go away, they're so used to being with their parents are so used to having them with them. And as much as we want our kids to go out and conquer the world, get that college experience, we still miss them and we still worry, we're concerned. So I understand her parents saying, hey, 2 hours, we can do this. While working at the pet store, Claudette meets a guy named Jason Ragland. Jason actually is the manager of the pet shop. He also graduated from college, the University of Georgia, with a degree in finance, and he graduated with honors. However, he was really excited and liked having his job as a manager at the pet store. There was also a guy that worked at the pet store named Chris, who Claudette thought was a pretty cool guy. She liked him on a friendly level. However, Chris was more interested in a romantic thing between him and Claudette. However, she was strictly thinking of friendship only. And this happens sometimes. Sometimes you meet somebody and they're so nice, they're so sweet, and all of a sudden you start thinking romantic thoughts. But the other person is not on that same page with you. And you just have to, go with the flow and let happen what's going to happen. If they don't feel comfortable with you, you have to move on and find someone who does. And a lot of times people find it very hard to do that. Claudette, with all the photos and everything that I saw of her, she is a very beautiful girl. Very petite, very outgoing. She was well-rounded, and so she was able to attract quite a few men. And that's how it goes. If you're outgoing, bubbly personality, no matter if you're super hot or not, if your personality is everything, people will flock to you because you are such a cool person to be around. They feel comfortable with you. Claudette instantly found an attraction to Jason. She thought that he was absolutely gorgeous. She thought that he was smart and funny and just as awesome as, most people thought about her. Jason was one of those people that also attracted people. He was very handsome and outgoing, so women were really attracted to him as well. At school, Claudette met a guy named John, and John took a special liking to Claudette as well. Claudette, just like with Chris, only wanted to be friends with John. However, John wanted something more. And it takes him a while to figure out she's not interested, no matter how many times she states to him, I just want to be friends. She would go out from time to time with John for coffee after class, or, just to have drinks, or, just to hang out, have lunch together. But she's always been firm that this is just a friendship. And I think that somewhere in the back of John's mind, he may have been thinking that maybe this friendship could turn into more. I know a lot of people that are in amazing relationships that started out as friends. I know a lot of relationship coaches or matchmakers. They usually say the best relationships start out as friends first. So I totally get this. He thinks that he might be able to turn this friendship into something more. It happens. Then here's where the differences show up from the different programs. On Betrayed, they talked about a guy named Martin. However, on Swamp People, they called him Michael. So I'm thinking that this is probably someone whose identity they are trying to protect. However, this is another guy that worked at the pet store. And Claudette went out on one date with him, but he was a little too handsy, a little forceful, and he was one of those guys that believed because I've done something nice to you, taking you out to dinner or won you a prize at the local carnival, you should be putting out for me. Claudette was not that kind of girl, and she was really ballsy and brassy. She's originally from New Jersey, and she brought that New Jersey swag all the way down to Georgia, and she let him know, no, there will be no sex and there will be no additional dates, period. You and I will never be. Another thing that was different from Betrayed and Swamp Murders was the person, Chris, is not in Swamp Murders. It's almost as if they merged him in with another person. So I'm assuming this was also to protect someone. Claudette also went out on a few dates with Chris, and she would always spend the majority of her date talking about Jason. This starts to truly piss Chris off. He doesn't want to talk about Jason. Who cares? And one little tidbit that I haven't told you yet about Jason. Jason has a girlfriend, but not just a girlfriend. She is actually his fiance. Yeah, Jason is absolutely engaged to someone else named Hannah. When Chris takes Claudette out on their very last date, he takes her to some sort of chain restaurant, and Claudette didn't appreciate it. Is this where you normally go with girls that you want to go out with? Because this is kind of cheap and low budget. So that offended him a little bit, on top of the fact that she still continued throughout the date to talk about Jason. He was not very happy about it. Not at all. All I can tell you is Chris's feelings were hurt quite a bit. By November of '93, Claudette and Jason had become extremely close. I'm talking close enough for overnight visits. Jason, however, was still engaged. So him and Claudette were still sneaking around behind Hannah's back. Hannah had absolutely no clue that Jason was entertaining someone else while she was a few hours away. The thing is, Hannah didn't live in Marietta, so she would drive to see him every so often, and so that gave Jason free range to have this full relationship with Claudette, which is something that was left out of the Swamp Murders. They never mentioned that Claudette was dating an engaged man. Again, I'm thinking that this was to protect Claudette's reputation, but I don't mind the fact that they took that out. Into February 1994, Claudette is still dating Jason, and his fiancee Hannah is still oblivious to this whole situation. Claudette actually would call Jason's house, and his fiancee Hannah would answer the phone. She would give Jason the call because she had no clue that there was anything going on. However, I don't understand why she wouldn't. I would absolutely be suspicious. Why is this girl calling? Who is this girl? But she had no suspicion. On February 15th, Claudette spends the night at Jason's house. The next day, they are supposed to get up and go see her parents. But there's a big secret. She is actually 4 months pregnant. She lets Jason know that she is pregnant and she thinks that they should get married. Jason agrees and says, "You're right, we should get married. We should go down and see your parents and, let them know that you're having a baby and that we are going to get married." And, he'll break off his relationship with Hannah. After that, Claudette's lease is supposed to be up like a month later. So she was going to actually move into Jason's apartment so that they could be a family. But on February 16th, 1994, the day she was to arrive at her parents' house with Jason, she never shows up. Her parents are calling her constantly, trying to figure out where she is. They have no clue where their daughter is. She's not answering any of their calls. And the only thing they know is that they spoke with her the evening of the 15th, and she told them that she would be down and she would be bringing a guest. But she didn't tell them who the guest was. They had never known or heard of Jason, period. On February 17th of 1994, her parents called the police to file a missing persons report. This is after they went back and forth up and down the freeways looking to see if maybe she has gotten into an accident, if she is abandoned on the side of the road, if she has somehow gotten lost on her way home. After calling all of her friends, after calling hospitals, checking to see where their daughter is, they decided to call the police and file a missing persons report. The police searched her apartment, and her apartment was in pristine condition. One thing that they did get the same on Betrayed and Swamp Murders is that detectives said that when they got to her apartment, her place was so neat. They were all wishing that their kids could be that neat. They knew that the crime scene had not been at her house. The police put an APB out on her truck, and her truck was actually located in Atlanta, Georgia, in an apartment complex on February 18th of 94, with the keys still in the ignition. The next step for the police was to go to the pet shop to interview some of her fellow employees to see if they've known anything, especially if they know who she was supposed to bring home with her when she visited her parents. So they could check to see, is that person missing as well, or does that person know anything? They met with Jason, and Jason tells the police that him and her were in a very serious relationship and that he was supposed to go home with her to visit her parents, and he got sick and wasn't able to go. Now, here's another difference. In Swamp Murders, he says that he faked sick and it caused an argument, and she got angry with him, hung up the phone, and went on her way to the trip by herself. In Betrayed, they said that he actually was sick and told her that he couldn't go, and she was very concerned about his well-being and told him, "You're right, you shouldn't go. I'll just check on you when I get back." Little difference, huh? When I Googled it online, I found out that Swamp Murders had it a little more correct, but we'll get into that later. Jason, however, while talking to the police, never told them anything about Hannah. He never told them that he was engaged to somebody else, and he never mentioned that she was pregnant. Other employees at the pet store, like Chris, informed them that Jason is a horrible person and he was much better for her. She should have considered him as her boyfriend and not Jason. So that made the police a little leery of Chris, thinking, would he do this girl harm because she doesn't want anything to do with him? I'll have to look into that. They also talked to John, her classmate. They found a Valentine's Day card that he gave her February 14th of 94, asking her to be his and telling her that he loves her. She accepted the card and told him up front, "John, we're just friends and I have a serious boyfriend." And he says, yeah, I know. I don't think he really knew. I think he knew that, but he didn't want to accept that. 2 weeks after she had been missing, police gave Jason and John a lie detector test. Jason passed his lie detector test with flying colors. John, however, failed miserably. When they asked him had he ever harmed her, he said no. The lie detector says you are a lie. The detectives went back to the pet store and talked to Martin from Betrayed, but Michael from Swamp Murders, and asked him if he had anything to do with her disappearance, if he knew anything. He was downright rude to the police and told them he didn't know a damn thing and to please back away from him and leave him the hell alone. The police asked him would he be willing to take a lie detector test to prove that he didn't have anything to do with it, and he told them, check back with me later, I'll think about it. That was awful, right? On March 27th, 1994, two canoers found Claudette Physic's body entangled on a riverbank. She was wrapped in a piece of carpet with a piece of steel and a boat anchor tied to her body to weigh her down. The only thing they were able to identify her with is her watch and her class ring that she was wearing. Due to the city having heavy rains, the river was flooded, and that is the only reason her body washed up. The detectives took a look at the steel that was wrapped around her and realized it had a manufacturer number on the steel. So that was a piece of evidence that they could research. The detectives went back to the pet store to speak to the employees again when one of the detectives looked next door and realized there was a construction project going on. So he went over to the construction project and asked to speak to the foreman. He asked the foreman, do you know this girl? He showed him a picture of Claudette. He says, no. He says, what about Martin/Michael? And he says, no. What about Jason? And the foreman says, yeah, Jason comes over here and says hi to us all the time. Sometimes he borrows some bricks for the pet store. The detective then shows him the steel and gives him the serial number on the side of it. And he says, yeah, that's definitely one of ours. So that points the police into the pet store again, because they're thinking somebody at this pet store had something to do with this girl's disappearance and murder. It wasn't until the autopsy was done before the police actually knew that Claudette was 4 months pregnant. That kind of sealed their thoughts of where they should go next. Claudette was actually beaten and strangled to death. It turns out that her baby was a little boy. On March 29, 1994, the police had an interview with Hannah and asked her if she knew of Claudette. And she says, pretty much all she knows is the girl works at the store and she calls Jason from time to time. And the police said, did you know that she was actually pregnant and engaged to marry Jason? Hannah was absolutely, completely shocked. She had no idea what the heck was going on, and the police knew that she was not involved in the disappearance and murder of Claudette. Hannah was absolutely clueless. On March 31st, 1994, police got a search warrant and they searched Jason's apartment. When they got to his apartment, they noticed he was packing up to move. However, there was a complete square cut out of his carpet. The police luminoled the area and found traces of blood. On April the 11th, 1994, Jason was arrested and charged with murder. As it turns out, on February 16th, morning of the murder, Claudette actually left Jason's apartment to go to class. After class, she was on her way back to Jason's house. Claudette did show up at Jason's apartment to pick him up, see her parents, and explain to them about their engagement and about the new baby. He tells her that he's changed his mind about everything. He doesn't want to marry her, he doesn't want to break up with Hannah, he doesn't want to meet her parents, and he doesn't want to be a father. At this point, he is so angry with her for ruining his life, interrupting his plans, which really... He beats her and strangles her, wraps her up in his carpet, goes to work and works his entire shift, comes back that evening, and disposes of her body in Athens, Georgia, in the river. Goes back living his life. For the life of me, I cannot understand. How do you snuff out the life of an innocent woman you claimed to love and a tiny baby growing inside of her that is half you, and then go back to the pet store to sell somebody a gerbil? What? How can you live with yourself? And then to go on for weeks and weeks on end playing this charade as the broken-hearted boyfriend. Yikes. As the police investigation is going on, Jason continues to plead his innocence until he realizes that the death penalty is now on the table. Had he only murdered Claudette, they would not have been able to add the death penalty. However, that baby that she was carrying is 4 months pregnant, which makes it a person. So, and could have been put to death. In order to save his own life, he goes ahead and finally admits his guilt and pleads guilty and is sentenced to life in prison. However, he gets to go up for parole after 28 years. He's currently been in jail for 26 years now. And I'm telling you, when that man goes up for parole, her entire family and all of her friends will be there at that parole board meeting to make sure that this devil never gets out of jail. I don't think he deserves to walk the face of this earth, period. The police asked the polygraphers, why is it that John actually flunked his lie detector test? And they explained to them that due to John being so emotional and so in love with Claudette, he was too emotional when he took the test. And that's what triggered his answers to come back as deception. Also, throughout the whole time that they were investigating this case, John was so worried about Claudette and what was happening, he had one of his friends call the police department multiple times to try to get information on the case. They also asked the polygraphers, why is it that Jason passed his polygraph test? And they said that they find that people who absolutely have zero conscience are able to take a lie detector test and pass with flying colors because they are not affected and they don't care about the crime or the issue that is at hand, which makes it even more disturbing. I guess the moral of this story is you never really know somebody. You may think that you know them, but you don't. And I mean, at one point, everybody thought John Wayne Gacy was a good guy. Oh my gosh, he's on the city council. Oh my gosh, he entertains kids. He dresses like a clown. Oh my God, he's a serial killer. Nobody saw that. Nobody saw that. You never know. At one point, the famous author Anne Rule, she sat next to Ted Bundy every night after midnight in the 911 call center. She didn't know that Ted Bundy was a murderer, but he walked her to her car every night to make sure she was safe. See what I mean? You never really know. Sometimes your killer is the person that you're close to. And that's scary and it creeps me out. My heart goes out to Claudette's family and her friends. Claudette was a sister, a daughter, a friend, a niece, a cousin. And her baby deserved to live. There's so many different options Jason could have chose. He could have just said, I'm out. I don't want to be with you. I don't want to marry you. I don't want to be a father. Take me down to child support. We'll work something out. I'd rather stay with Hannah. Or he could have just been a deadbeat. Just bounce. You know, so many people do it. It's not right, but I'd rather you just walk away from me than to kill me. Let me and my baby live. This man should never get out of jail, ever. And until next time.